Voting Slav TV. In April of 2017, the EU Commission demanded that Poland accept its quota of migrants as part of the EU's migrant relocation program that would serve to alleviate the high influx of migrants entering countries such as Greece and Italy. Naturally, mighty Poland refused this absurd demand from the corrupt EU, which asked that Poland, along with Hungary, take in some 160,000 Syrian, Eritrean, and Iraqi asylum seekers. After realizing that Poland wasn't playing around, the EU starkly responded by saying that it would not hesitate to implement sanctions on the country if Poland failed to accept their migrant relocation quotas by May 10th of 2017. Similar sentiments were also echoed by the newly elected French President Emmanuel Macron, who claimed that Poland should face sanctions for failing to respect the rights and values of the European Union. Despite this intensifying pressure from the EU, mighty Poland still refused to budge on its anti-migrant stance. Polish Interior Minister Mariusz Błaszczak openly told Polish radio that the current migrant crisis is solely a Western European problem, as Western European nations had colonies back in their time which benefited from Asia and Africa's riches. He added that this was simply an attempt by the EU to shift the repayment of those debts onto Poland. Błaszczak also highlighted the fact that the terror attacks that have been taking place in Western Europe, specifically the bigger EU countries, were now unfortunately a fact of life, and that Poland would rather face sanctions than take in a single migrant. Earlier this year, Polish Prime Minister Beata Szydło also laughed in the face of the EU, advising that Brussels had no way of imposing sanctions over Poland and that these EU threats were simply a foolish attempt to blackmail Poland and other member states like Hungary. So, by now you're probably asking yourself, how can Poland do this? How can Poland simply turn its back to the EU and say no to all these poor migrants? The truth is that Poland is fully awake and fully aware of the problems brought on by diversity, especially when it entails forcefully accepting massive numbers of Muslim migrants coming in from some of the poorest and least progressive countries on earth. In light of some of the recent terrorist attacks that have been plaguing Western Europe, Poland knows that following in Germany, Sweden, and the UK's footsteps will only send it spiraling down into a complete state of chaos and lunacy. Poland has continually demonstrated that it truly cares for its citizens and that it will do anything to protect its people in order to secure both their livelihoods and that of their nation as well. Poland's response to the migrant crisis has fortunately been completely opposite of the laissez-faire attitude of much of Western Europe. Take, for example, an incident that occurred in January of 2017 when a local man in the Polish town of Elk was stabbed to death by Muslim migrants outside of a kebab shop. This stabbing fueled a great sense of outrage in the community, which resulted in retaliation riots and the burning down of this same kebab shop. While this may have not been the most rational decision, it sure as hell did send out a firm message that Polish lives came first in Poland and that migrants would not be let off the hook for their crimes as they are in Sweden and Germany. Poland also held several massive anti-Islamic protests this year, with over 150,000 people attending the last one earlier this May. These protests, of course, received minimal coverage by the mainstream media in an attempt to cover up any displeasure with the EU's sickening plan of Islamizing Europe. At present, Poland remains one of the last EU nations with a strong sentiment of national identity. Naturally, this bothers the EU, which will stop at nothing to destroy borders and all cultural identities within Europe. Overall, mighty Poland has truly emerged as a defying force in the fight against massive Islamic migration in Europe and should be looked at as a role model by other European nations that are suffering from this tremendous problem. To all my Polish friends out there watching this, keep up the great fight, and no matter what happens, do not bend over to the demands of the corrupt EU and their agenda to completely ruin and replace your country.
We were made to be courageous. We were made to lead the way.